Hello, everyone. I'm currently at a park in Macon, Georgia. Today, I'd like to talk about whether tinters working in Korea can come to the United States and open a tint shop. What would it be like to run a tint shop in the US? I'm sure many of you have thought about it. So today, I'm going to talk about how to open a tint shop in the United States. That will be the topic of today's discussion. You may have lived your entire life in Korea while running your own tint shop or working as an employed tinter. You may have imagined working in the United States or watched videos of tinting work being done here. But can a Korean tinter actually come to the United States? First, window tint laws are different in every state. After coming to the US, I realized just how different they really are. Why are the laws so different from state to state? That is simply how the US legal system works. You can think of each US state as its own country. Although the laws vary by state, they generally follow similar patterns. There is no law that completely bans window tinting. Instead, the law requires you to follow certain tint percentages, but those percentages vary from state to state. What exactly differs between the states? It is mainly the tint percentage allowed on the driver's and front passengers' windows. Some states require 50%, which is very light. Other states allow 25%. States with a 25% requirement are usually located in hotter regions. As you travel farther north to places such as New York or Boston, the legal tint percentage for the front side windows becomes lighter. When people say that US tint laws vary by state, the main issue is usually the front side windows. The legal percentage for the driver's and front passengers' windows varies by state. In almost every state, windshield tinting is generally prohibited. Some states require 70% VLT, but almost any film applied to the windshield will make it difficult to meet that 70% requirement. Even without any tint film, a factory windshield may already measure around 70% or 75% VLT. In that condition, if you install an almost transparent 70% film, the combined VLT of the glass and film may drop to around 50%. That is why windshield tinting is effectively prohibited. But what is the situation really like in the United States? What actually happens in the real world? This is what I noticed after coming to Georgia. I rented a car and drove several times on a highway route that took about an hour and a half each way. I also drove around downtown Macon quite a bit. As I looked at the parked cars, I noticed that a large number of them had window tint, even if the legal requirement is 35%. In reality, many vehicles had tint darker than 35%, such as 20% or 15%. I saw a lot of vehicles like that. I had assumed that tint laws were strictly enforced in the United States and that the police would issue a ticket for illegal tint, resulting in a fine of around 150,000 to 200,000 won in Korean currency. I thought dark tint was not really allowed, so I wondered why so many people were driving around with it. I thought they shouldn't get caught with that. They should have installed a lighter film. To comply with a 35% requirement on the front side windows, you may need to install a very light 50% film. But from what I could see, many of the films looked completely black from the side. I saw many vehicles with extremely dark tint, similar to what you often see in Korea. When I asked why that was happening, I was told that police enforcement is very limited. Police officers even visit tint shops themselves. And police vehicles also get tinted. Officers also bring in their personal vehicles that they drive home after work. And from what I have heard, they often ask for very dark tint because it is hot. Of course, making the tint extremely dark does not automatically make the vehicle cooler. The film needs strong heat rejection performance. Many people assume that darker tint blocks more heat, but that is not true. It is not true at all. No matter how dark the film is, darkness alone does not provide heat rejection. The film must block infrared radiation to reject heat. Even a transparent film can provide heat rejection. In any case, that is the current situation. In reality, police enforcement of window tint by specifically targeting individual vehicles seems to have become much more relaxed. I do not think this is limited to Georgia, because so many vehicles already have window tint. It has become difficult to single out and enforce the law against only certain vehicles. Now that I have explained the tint laws, let's talk about how consumers view window tinting. I will answer that question next. To provide effective heat rejection, the tint film must contain material specifically designed to block heat. Another way to describe that heat is infrared radiation. Infrared radiation exists within a specific wavelength range. To block those specific wavelengths, the film needs to contain ceramic materials. Without them, the film cannot effectively reject heat. A vehicle may have extremely dark tint, but if the film does not have an IR blocking coating, it will not provide heat rejection. It creates shade, but the interior still feels hot. That means the heat is not being blocked. That happens because the film lacks a heat rejection coating. With the right film, plenty of light can enter while the interior remains cooler. This type of technology is often called ceramic, or it may be described as an IR chemical coating. Those materials need to be coated onto the film. However, awareness of ceramic tint and ceramic window film still does not seem very high in the United States. The market appears to be at a stage where tint shop owners and tinters in the United States have started learning about ceramic film, but many general consumers still do not know much about it. Of course, Korean residents in Atlanta and Georgia are familiar with it. They understand why ceramic film is beneficial. But among American consumers, I felt that many people still do not understand it very well. Tint shop owners who understand the value and benefits of ceramic tint explain ceramic film to customers who are unfamiliar with heat rejection technology. They might say something like this: choose ceramic tint for more effective heat rejection. For an additional $100 or $200, you can upgrade to ceramic tint. It seems that this type of sales approach has only become common in the tint market within the last 3 to 5 years. Another difference in the tinting environment and installation culture is how consumers view installation quality. Korean customers inspect the work very carefully. They pay close attention to dust and finishing details and expect a very high level of installation quality. They are also very careful when selecting a film. Consultations about tint percentages can also take a long time. Compared to that, American consumers tend to view their vehicles differently. I do not think many Americans spend an entire month researching tint and searching online before getting their car tinted. Of course, some probably do, but compared to Korea, I believe there are very few. In Korea, people do that. If their new car will be delivered in 2 or 3 months, they research tint brands, analyze performance charts, and decide which tint percentage to choose. That shows how awareness and attitudes toward window film are somewhat different. Because of that, expectations regarding installation quality are also different. If the installation is reasonably clean and mostly free of dust, many customers accept it and are not overly demanding. They are generally not extremely picky. That is often the case in the United States. Even shops installing the same film from a certain brand A may charge completely different prices. That is because pricing is completely open and flexible. Prices vary depending on the shop's working environment and the installer's skill level. The price differences can be enormous. When Americans look for a tint shop, they often check Google reviews. Some customers carefully read those reviews, while others simply notice a tint shop while driving by. They may call the shop or walk in and ask whether they can get their windows tinted. There are plenty of consumers like that because they do not examine quality in extreme detail. They may simply want the vehicle tinted. There are quite a lot of customers like that among American consumers. As a result, tint prices naturally vary widely. Each shop sets and charges its own tint prices. The price also depends on the type of tint service and business model the shop wants to provide. Even when using the exact same film, one shop may charge $300 while another charges $700. That kind of price difference is completely possible in the US tint market. By understanding some of these characteristics of the US tint industry, I believe this information can be helpful to anyone considering entering the market. That is why I introduced several key characteristics of tinting in the United States. There are many other topics I would like to discuss, but I will stop here for today. I will return with more useful information in the future. That concludes today's video. I'll see you again next time.